To 7 wonderful years, Tom said, raising his crystal flute of Dom Pérignon. His blue eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. That same smile that had made me fall for him during our first meeting in the Horizon Tech boardroom. 7 years, I echoed, clinking my glass against his. The champagne was perfect, the view from our private dining room at Montagne spectacular, overlooking downtown Denver's twinkling skyline. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. Tom's phone buzzed for the 3rd time in 20 minutes. He glanced down, then quickly flipped it over. "Sorry, it's just about the Axion merger," he said smoothly. "Henderson is getting cold feet again." I nodded, taking another sip of champagne to mask my irritation. Our anniversary dinner had been rescheduled twice because of this merger. As CFO, Tom had been working increasingly late hours, but tonight was supposed to be just about us. "You should see the latest projection numbers," he continued. His face animated in a way it hadn't been when talking about our planned weekend getaway. "The board is thrilled with how we're positioning ourselves." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Rebecca Morgan. At 35, I'd built my reputation as the marketing executive who'd transformed Horizon Tech from a regional player to a national brand recognized for innovation. I'd met Tom when I was brought on 7 years ago. He'd been with the company since its early days, a financial wizard who'd helped navigate the company through its initial growth phases. Our courtship had been a whirlwind, late nights working, on proposals turned into dinners, then weekends, then a diamond ring 9 months later. We were the power couple of Horizon Tech, the financial strategist and the marketing visionary. But power balances shift. Over the past 2 years, my campaigns had brought in the clients that had quadrupled our valuation. The upcoming merger with Axion Technologies, a deal that would make us one of the top cloud solution providers in the country, had been initiated through relationships I'd cultivated. I excused myself to use the restroom, needing a moment to collect my thoughts. As I checked my lipstick in the mirror, I noticed a text notification from Jen, my best friend since college and a top corporate attorney. "Call me when you can. Found something odd in those docs you asked about." I'd asked Jen to look over some paperwork related to my stock options. Nothing urgent, but her message tugged at me. I pushed it aside. Tonight was about celebrating, not work. When I returned to the table, Tom was on his phone again, but he quickly ended the call. "Should we order dessert?" I suggested, reaching for the menu. "Actually, I have a surprise for you," Tom said. "I've arranged for us to spend the weekend at the Aspen Lodge. We leave tomorrow afternoon." My heart warmed. You remembered. The Aspen Lodge was where we'd spent our honeymoon. We'd always talked about going back for our 10th anniversary, but Tom had remembered early. Maybe I'd been too harsh in my judgment. Back at home, Tom disappeared into his study while I packed for our weekend away. His office door was slightly ajar, and I heard him speaking in hushed tones. "Everything's arranged. No, she doesn't suspect anything. The papers are ready. Yes, right after the weekend. Trust me, this is the perfect timing." I froze, my hand clutching the silk blouse I'd been about to fold. Papers? Perfect timing? A cold feeling spread through my chest. Was Tom planning something for the company that he hadn't shared with me? I stepped closer to the door, my heart pounding. "Natalie, this has to be handled perfectly. Once we go public with the merger, the stock options will be locked. Rebecca's shares will be diluted in the restructuring, exactly as we planned." Natalie, his executive assistant of the past 10 months. Young, efficient, always perfectly put together in designer outfits that seemed beyond an assistant's salary. "I've moved most of the assets already," Tom continued. "She'll never trace them through the holding companies we set up. Our anniversary trip is the perfect cover. She'll be relaxed, distracted. By the time she realizes what's happening, the deal will be done." The room tilted slightly. I steadied myself against the wall, grateful for the thick carpet that muffled any sound I might make. Once my divorce filing goes through, we can accelerate the timeline on the other matter. He chuckled softly. Harold thinks he's leading the board, but we've already secured the votes we need. With Rebecca out of the picture, the marketing division reorganization can proceed as planned. Divorce filing, out of the picture. The words echoed in my head as reality crashed down around me. Tom wasn't just having an affair with his assistant. He was planning to push me out of the company I'd helped build, while simultaneously ending our marriage. And apparently, they had Harold Chen, one of our senior board members, believing he was orchestrating a reorganization that was actually their plan. Our flight to Bermuda is booked for next month, Tom was saying. Once everything's finalized, we'll take some time away while the dust settles. I backed away silently, mind racing. Our anniversary weekend wasn't a romantic gesture. It was a tactical move in a carefully orchestrated plan. While I'd been focused on building our company and our life together, Tom and Natalie had been plotting my professional and personal demise. My phone buzzed again. Jen. I needed to call her, but first, I needed to compose myself. Tom couldn't know that I'd overheard them. Not yet. I retreated to our bedroom, hands trembling as I continued packing as if nothing had happened. 7 years of marriage. 4 years of pouring my heart and soul into Horizon Tech. All of it had apparently meant nothing to Tom. I called Jen from the bathroom, running the shower to mask my voice. I need to see those documents tonight, I said, without preamble. Becca, what's going on? You sound... Not over the phone. Can you meet me at Cafe Meridian in an hour? It's your anniversary dinner. Tom got called into an emergency meeting about the merger. I lied smoothly. Please, Jen, it's important. The cafe was quiet, tucked away in a neighborhood where Horizon Tech employees rarely ventured. Jen was waiting in a corner booth, a folder and her laptop in front of her. You look like hell, she said bluntly as I slid into the seat across from her. Tom is planning to divorce me and somehow push me out of Horizon, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. He's working with Natalie, and they've apparently been moving assets and making arrangements for months. Jen didn't look shocked. That explains what I found. She opened her laptop. When you asked me to review your stock option agreement, something seemed off about the dates of vesting, so I did some digging. She turned the screen toward me, showing a complex chart of corporate structures. 3 months ago, Horizon created a new holding company that now owns the patents to your biggest product innovations. Your name isn't anywhere on these documents, despite you being listed on the original patent applications. And there's more. Your stock options have a trigger clause I've never seen before. In the event of a merger, your shares could be subject to a mandatory buyout at pre-merger valuation. My stomach clenched. He mentioned dilution of my shares. Classic corporate spouse sabotage, Jen said grimly. I've seen it before. Use the marriage to gain access and trust, then discard the spouse when convenient while keeping the assets and power. He's also got Harold Chen involved somehow, I added. Mentioned something about Harold thinking he's leading the board, but that they've secured votes for some kind of marketing division reorganization. Jen's eyes narrowed. Harold Chen? That doesn't make sense. He's been your biggest advocate on the board. Remember how he championed your cloud security campaign last year? I nodded slowly. Tom made it sound like Harold was being manipulated, not that he was part of the plan. We need more information, Jen said decisively. And you need protection, both legally and financially. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling Michael Rodriguez, best forensic accountant in Colorado. If Tom's been moving assets, Michael will find them. What about this weekend? Tom's arranged for us to go to the Aspen Lodge. Should I cancel? Jen thought for a moment. No. Go. Act normal. We need time to gather evidence and build a strategy. If you suddenly change plans, he'll know something's up. So I just pretend everything's fine while my husband plans to destroy me? My voice cracked for the first time. Jen reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You pretend just long enough for us to make sure he doesn't succeed. Becca, you built Horizon's brand from nothing. The clients love you. The team respects you. Tom may have been there longer, but you're the heart of that company now. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Okay, what's our first move? First, we secure copies of everything. Emails, financial records, anything you can legally access. Second, we map out who we can trust at Horizon. Third, we find out what's really going on with Harold Chen. I left the cafe with a plan taking shape. Tomorrow, I would smile and pack for a romantic weekend with my husband, all while knowing it might be our last. But unlike Tom, I wouldn't be caught unprepared. Back at home, Tom was still working in his study. I slipped past, my mind racing, with questions. How long had this been happening? Had anything in our marriage been real? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And perhaps most painfully, how had I missed the signs? The next morning, I greeted Tom with coffee and a smile, forcing myself to play the role of unsuspecting wife. He seemed relaxed, confident, a man who believed his plans were proceeding perfectly. I'm looking forward to this weekend, I said, watching his face carefully. Me too, he replied, kissing my cheek before checking his phone. Though I may need to take a few calls about the merger. Of course, I said agreeably. The Axion deal is too important to ignore, even for our anniversary. His eyes flickered with something, surprise at my understanding, perhaps, or relief that I wouldn't protest the intrusion of work into our supposed romantic getaway. While Tom showered, I quickly scanned his desk calendar. A board meeting was scheduled for Monday afternoon, unusual timing, as our board typically met on Thursdays. The notation simply read, Special Session, Reorganization Proposal. 3 days. Whatever they were planning would happen in 3 days. The Aspen Lodge was as beautiful as I remembered. Rustic luxury nestled among pine trees, with mountain views that took your breath away. Any other time, I would have been enchanted. Now, I noticed only the spotty cell service that would make communications with Jen and Michael difficult, and the isolation that suddenly felt less romantic and more strategic. Tom was attentive throughout dinner, reminiscing about our early days together, asking about my thoughts on future marketing, directions for Horizon. Was he fishing for information? Or was this part of his act? The devoted husband enjoying an anniversary celebration. I've been thinking, he said as we lingered over dessert, about your role after the merger. I kept my expression neutral. Oh? You've done amazing things with marketing, but with Axion's team coming in, there might be some redundancies. Redundancies, I repeated, taking a sip of wine to hide the tremble in my fingers. Nothing to worry about, he assured me quickly. Just some restructuring to eliminate overlap. Your position is secure, of course. Liar. I smiled. I appreciate your concern, but I'm not worried. My team has delivered consistent results. The Axion people would be foolish to mess with success. Something flickered in Tom's eyes. Annoyance. Perhaps that I wasn't expressing insecurity he could then soothe with false assurances. That night, as Tom slept beside me, I slipped out to the lodge's business center. The lone computer was ancient, but it had internet access. I had 40 minutes before the center closed for the night. I logged into my secure email to find messages from both Jen and Michael. Michael had been busy. Identified 3 LLC structures created in past 6 months, all connected to offshore accounts, transfers totaling $2.4M from joint accounts, structured to appear as business investments, working on tracking destinations. Jen's message was equally concerning. Board packet for Monday obtained from friendly source. Proposal includes marketing division restructure that removes you from leadership. Effective immediately post-merger approval. Harold Chen listed as opposing, but they claim to have votes. Working on counter strategy. Call when safe. I didn't have time to call. Instead, I drafted quick responses with additional questions, then turned to the most important task, accessing the secure cloud storage where I kept backup copies of all my work at Horizon. The marketing campaigns I'd designed, the client relationships I'd built, the strategic plans I'd developed, these were my true leverage. While Tom had been busy siphoning money and plotting my removal, he'd overlooked the real assets: institutional knowledge and relationships. I downloaded key files, forwarded crucial emails to my personal account, and made notes about which clients to contact. Then I cleared the browser history and returned to our room. Tom was still sleeping peacefully, oblivious to my midnight maneuvers. I studied his face in the dim light. The man I'd loved, built a life with, trusted. Now a stranger plotting my downfall. The next day passed in a blur of forced smiles and pretend relaxation. Tom suggested a hike, and I agreed, using the spotty cell service along the trail to exchange texts with Jen when Tom wasn't looking. Need to talk to Harold, I texted during a water break. Can you arrange? Jen's reply came an hour later. Meeting set, tonight, 9 p.m., his house. That meant I needed to get back to Denver by evening. I waited until we returned to the lodge before making my move. Tom, I said, feigning concern as I checked my phone. Olivia just texted. There's an issue with the Westfield campaign. The client is threatening to pull out over a miscommunication. I need to handle this personally. Tom frowned. Can't it wait until tomorrow? We're supposed to have dinner at the lake. It's a $12 million account, I said, knowing he couldn't argue with the numbers. I'm sorry to cut our weekend short, but you know how important Westfield is to our quarterly projections. He couldn't protest without revealing his hand. After all, the devoted husband and committed CFO would understand the needs of the business. I'll drive you back, he offered. No need, I countered quickly. Stay and enjoy the rest of the weekend. I've already called for a car service. I'll see you at home tomorrow. 3 hours later, I was sitting in Harold Chen's elegant living room, watching his face darken as Jen laid out everything we'd discovered. This is outrageous, Harold said, setting down his teacup with enough force to rattle the saucer. The board has been deliberately misled. So you didn't know about the reorganization plan? I asked carefully. I knew about a reorganization plan, Harold clarified. One that would elevate your role post-merger while restructuring the divisions beneath you. Not this. This coup. He turned to his computer, tapping rapidly. They've been circulating documents using my electronic signature. But notice the timestamps. I was in Tokyo when these approvals supposedly came from my office. Jen leaned forward. Harold, the board meeting is tomorrow. They claim to have the votes. They're bluffing, Harold said firmly. Without my vote, they have at most 4 of 9. But we can't just block them. We need to counterattack. He fixed his gaze on me. Rebecca, how would you feel about accelerating your career path at Horizon? What did you have in mind? I asked. The board has been discussing CEO succession, planning for months. Richard is retiring next year, sooner if the merger succeeds. We've been quietly assessing internal candidates. Understanding dawned. And I was on that list. Harold nodded. At the top of it, until Tom began his campaign of whispers. He's been systematically undermining you, suggesting you're planning to leave after the merger, that your recent marketing strategies were actually collaborative efforts where he provided the real vision. My blood boiled. While I'd been working 80-hour weeks to position Horizon for success, my husband had been sabotaging me behind the scenes. So what's our play? Jen asked, ever the strategist. Harold smiled thinly. We bring everything into the light. Tomorrow's board meeting was called under false pretenses, but we'll use it to expose the truth. I've already contacted 3 other board members I know I can trust. With my vote, that gives us 5, a majority. He looked at me with determination. They wanted to use this meeting to end your career at Horizon. Instead, we'll use it to launch the next phase. The hours that followed were a flurry of preparation. Michael compiled a comprehensive financial report showing the money trail. Jen prepared legal documentation outlining potential shareholder, lawsuits, and securities violations. Olivia, my loyal VP of operations whom we'd brought into our confidence, gathered statements from key clients about their relationships with me versus the company as a whole. By morning, we were ready. I hadn't returned home, hadn't spoken to Tom except to text that I was staying at the office to handle the Westfield crisis. He'd responded with apparent concern and support, the caring husband and colleague. The final piece fell into place when Natalie's executive assistant friend, feeling guilty about her role in their schemes, forwarded emails proving the conspiracy. The evidence was damning. Detailed plans to force me out professionally while Tom drained our personal assets in preparation for divorce. At 2 p.m., I walked into the Horizon Tech boardroom, dressed in a power suit and armed with the truth. Tom's expression when he saw me was priceless. First surprise, then poorly concealed alarm. Rebecca, he recovered quickly. We weren't expecting you. This is a special session about restructuring the marketing division, I finished for him. Yes, I'm aware. The boardroom fell silent as I took a seat directly across from Tom. The polished mahogany table reflected the afternoon sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the faces of 9 board members who would determine my fate and the future of Horizon Tech. Richard Keller, our silver-haired CEO who'd built Horizon from a startup to a regional powerhouse, looked genuinely confused. Tom, I thought this meeting was to discuss final merger preparations with Axion. Why is Rebecca being mentioned in relation to restructuring? Before Tom could respond, Harold Chen placed a folder on the table. Because, Richard, there appears to be a shadow agenda, one that wasn't properly disclosed to all board members. He slid copies of documents toward each person at the table. These are the actual proposals being presented today, with my electronic signature fraudulently applied while I was in Tokyo. Tom's face paled slightly, but he maintained his composure. Harold, these are the standard restructuring documents. We discussed. Your office approved them last week. My office did not, Harold countered calmly. And I've brought my travel itinerary and electronic access logs to prove it. Board member Susan Winters, a venture capitalist who'd been with Horizon since its second funding round, flipped through the pages with growing concern. This isn't a minor reorganization. This is a complete dismantling of our most successful division, removing our head of marketing who's delivered consistent growth for 4 consecutive years. She looked up sharply. Why wasn't this circulated? In advance per our bylaws? Tom cleared his throat. The merger timeline required expedited procedures, which still require proper notification, interrupted James Peterson, our most conservative board member. And I see no legal justification for expediting a complete restructuring of our marketing leadership. I remained silent, watching the room's dynamics shift. The confident smirk Natalie had worn when entering the boardroom was fading. She sat behind Tom, ostensibly taking notes but actually texting rapidly under the table. If I may, I finally said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I believe I can shed some light on the real agenda here. I nodded to Olivia, who had been waiting outside. She entered with Michael Rodriguez, carrying additional folders. This is Michael Rodriguez, a forensic accountant who has been tracking some concerning financial movements related to Horizon Tech, I explained. He's prepared a report that I believe is relevant to today's discussion. Tom's composure cracked. This is irregular and inappropriate. We have a set agenda, which was created under false pretenses, Harold interjected. I think we should hear what Mr. Rodriguez has discovered. Michael distributed his reports methodically. Over the past 6 months, approximately $4 million has been transferred from Horizon operating accounts through a series of shell companies. These transfers were disguised as vendor payments, but were ultimately routed to offshore accounts under the control of 2 Horizon executives. The room erupted in murmurs. Richard Keller's face darkened as he scanned the documents. These bear your signature, Tom, and Natalie's. This is absurd, Tom protested, but his voice lacked conviction. These are legitimate business expenses related to merger preparations, consulting fees, due diligence costs, to companies that didn't exist before March of this year, Michael continued smoothly, and which have no employees, no offices, and no history of providing consulting services. The money trail leads directly to personal accounts in the Cayman Islands. Susan Winters closed her folder decisively. Richard, I move that we suspend this restructuring vote immediately and convene an emergency audit committee. I second the motion, Harold added promptly. Tom stood abruptly. This is a coordinated attack on my character. Rebecca is clearly threatened by the necessary changes coming with the merger and has fabricated these accusations. I finally opened my own folder. Nothing here is fabricated, Tom. In fact, I have emails detailing your plans to remove me from the company while simultaneously processing our divorce. I slid the printed emails across the table. You should be more careful about what you put in writing and about whom you trust with your schemes. Richard picked up the emails, his expression growing increasingly troubled as he read. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the sound of pages turning as board members reviewed the evidence. Tom, is there an explanation for this? Richard finally asked, his voice heavy with disappointment. Tom's eyes darted around the room, calculating his remaining options. Finding none, his demeanor shifted from defensive to aggressive. Fine, yes, I was planning to restructure marketing. Rebecca's approach is flashy but unsustainable. She's built a personality cult with clients rather than sound business relationships. When she inevitably leaves, which multiple sources indicated, she was planning after the merger, those clients would leave with her. And the financial transfers? James Peterson pressed, tapping Michael's report. Preparatory measures, Tom said dismissively. Insurance against market volatility during the merger transition. Everything was going to be returned to the appropriate accounts post-merger. Through shell companies and personal offshore accounts? Susan asked incredulously. That's not insurance, Tom. That's embezzlement. And what about these? I asked quietly, sliding forward one final document, printouts of text messages between Tom and Natalie discussing their future plans, the property they'd purchase in Bermuda, the new positions they'd create for themselves after pushing me out. The messages had been provided by Natalie's assistant, who'd finally realized she was being used as a pawn in their game. The timestamps correlated perfectly with our anniversary dinner. Messages sent while I was in the restroom, while Tom claimed to be discussing the merger with Henderson. Tom stared at the messages, then at Natalie, whose face had drained of color. In that moment, his mask fell completely. You think you're so clever, he hissed at me, abandoning any pretense of innocence. Always the star, always the one clients want to work with. Do you have any idea how it feels to build a company for years, only to be overshadowed by your wife? To watch the board start considering her for positions that should have been mine? The raw bitterness in his voice stunned the room. Even Natalie looked shocked at his outburst. Tom, Richard said sharply, that's enough. No, it's not enough, Tom continued, years of resentment finally spilling over. I founded the financial structure of this company. I managed the investments, the growth strategy. Then Rebecca comes in with her marketing flair and suddenly she's the future of Horizon? I deserved better. I deserved recognition. You deserved what your performance earned, Harold said coldly. As did Rebecca. The difference is that she elevated the company through innovation and relationship building, while you apparently chose sabotage and theft. Richard stood slowly, his authority filling the room. I believe we've heard enough. Tom Morgan, you are suspended effective immediately pending a full investigation. Security will escort you from the building. Natalie Jenkins, the same applies to you. He nodded to his executive assistant, who had been quietly observing from the corner. She stepped out, presumably to summon security. You can't do this, Tom protested, desperation creeping into his voice. The merger will proceed without you, Richard finished firmly. The board will appoint an interim CFO today. The next few minutes passed in a blur. Security arrived to escort Tom and Natalie out. Tom attempted to argue, but fell silent when Richard mentioned the potential for criminal charges. As they left, Tom shot me one final venomous glance. I met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away until the boardroom door closed behind him. After a brief recess to process what had occurred, the board reconvened. The restructuring proposal was unanimously rejected. An emergency audit committee was formed to investigate the full extent of Tom's financial manipulations. And then came the moment I hadn't anticipated. We have one more matter to address, Richard said, looking around. The table. In light of today's revelations, I'm accelerating my retirement plans. The merger with Axion represents a natural transition point, and I believe Horizon needs fresh leadership for its next chapter. He turned to me. Rebecca, the succession committee had already identified you as my eventual replacement. Given circumstances, I'm formally recommending to the board that you be named CEO effective immediately upon merger completion, which is now approximately 1 month away. I sat perfectly still, processing his words. When I'd walked into this room, I'd been fighting to save my career. Now I was being offered the company's top position. Richard, I'm honored, but this is unexpected, I managed to say. Shouldn't there be a formal search process? We've been quietly assessing candidates for 6 months, Harold explained. Your name consistently topped the list based on performance metrics, leadership qualities, and strategic vision. The only obstacle was Tom's systematic campaign to undermine you, which we now understand was motivated by personal jealousy and ambition. Susan Winters nodded. Your handling of this situation further demonstrates your qualifications. You gathered evidence methodically, built a coalition of support, and presented your case professionally, even while dealing with personal betrayal. I'll need time to consider this, I said, though my mind was already racing with possibilities. The challenges, the opportunities, the chance to truly shape Horizon's future. Of course, Richard agreed, though I hope you'll accept. The board will formalize the offer tomorrow with a formal announcement to coincide with the merger completion. The meeting adjourned with a sense of resolution tinged with shock. As board members filtered out, expressing their support and outrage on my behalf, Harold remained behind. Are you all right? He asked quietly when we were alone. I honestly don't know, I admitted. Professionally, this is everything I've worked toward. Personally, I trailed off, the weight of Tom's betrayal finally hitting me now that the adrenaline was fading. Personally, you've been dealt a terrible blow, Harold acknowledged. But remember this. Tom didn't betray you because you were weak. He betrayed you because you were strong, too strong for his ego to handle. I nodded, gathering my materials. Thank you, Harold, for believing in me, for fighting for me. I didn't fight for you, he corrected with a small smile. I simply made sure the truth had its moment. You did the fighting yourself. Outside the boardroom, Olivia was waiting with Jen. Their expressions told me news had already spread through the building. Security cleared out Tom's office, Olivia reported. His company devices have been secured for the investigation team. Jen smiled triumphantly. And I've already filed preliminary paperwork with the court. Tom's access to your joint accounts has been frozen pending divorce proceedings. I should feel victorious, I said as we walked toward my office. Instead, I just feel hollow. That's normal, Jen assured me. You've lost a marriage and had to fight for your career simultaneously. It's okay to not feel like celebrating yet. Besides, Olivia added with a meaningful look, the real victory hasn't happened yet. 1 month from now, when you're announced as CEO, that's when we celebrate. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. The audit committee uncovered the full extent of Tom's financial manipulations. Nearly $4 million diverted through various channels, though thankfully, most had been recovered. The merger negotiations proceeded smoothly without his interference, and my divorce attorney was building an ironclad case that would ensure Tom gained nothing from his schemes. I threw myself into work, finding solace in the familiar challenges of marketing campaigns and client relationships. The office had initially buzzed with gossip about Tom's dramatic departure, but that quickly subsided as merger preparations intensified. 3 weeks after the board meeting, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Rebecca, it's Natalie Jenkins. I nearly hung up, but curiosity won out. What do you want, Natalie? To apologize, she said, her voice lacking its usual polish, and to offer information that might help with your case against Tom. Why would you do that? I asked skeptically. Because he's done to me exactly what he did to you, she replied bitterly. Used me, lied to me, and now he's trying to blame everything on me to save himself. I considered this. I'm listening. Tom had another account, one the investigators haven't found yet. He told me it was our insurance policy if things went wrong. She gave me details about a hidden account in Singapore containing another $2 million. I'll pass this to the investigation team, I said neutrally. Is there anything else? Just that. She hesitated. I'm sorry. I know it doesn't mean anything, but I am. He convinced me you were the villain. Cold, calculating, planning to push him out of the company he helped build. By the time I realized the truth, I was already complicit. I didn't offer forgiveness or understanding. Some betrayals run too deep. Goodbye, Natalie, I said simply and ended the call. I forwarded the information to Michael, who confirmed the account existed. Another piece of evidence against Tom, another reminder of his systematic betrayal. That evening, alone in the home Tom and I had shared, I finally allowed myself to truly feel everything I'd been suppressing. The pain of betrayal, the shock of discovering the man I'd loved had been plotting against me, the anger at the years wasted with someone who had viewed me as competition rather than a partner. I cried for what felt like hours, grieving not just the end of my marriage, but the loss of the future I'd imagined. Then, exhausted but somehow lighter, I began packing Tom's remaining belongings into boxes. It was time to reclaim my space, just as I'd reclaimed my professional standing. The day of the merger announcement arrived with perfect early autumn weather. The Denver skyline gleamed in the morning light as I drove to Horizon's headquarters. Today, Axion Technologies would officially become part of Horizon Tech, creating one of the country's leading cloud solution providers. And I would be announced as the CEO of the combined entity. The board had made their decision official 2 weeks earlier. Richard had been mentoring me through the transition, introducing me to key Axion executives, sharing institutional knowledge that couldn't be found in any document or database. I'd moved into a new home, a modern loft downtown with views of the mountains and no memories of Tom. The divorce proceedings were progressing, with Tom facing not only the dissolution of our marriage, but potential criminal charges for financial fraud. His career was in ruins, his reputation destroyed. He'd reached out once through his attorney, offering a settlement proposal that I'd rejected outright. As I parked in my designated space, soon to be the CEO's parking spot, I reflected on the journey of the past month, from the devastation of discovering Tom's betrayal to standing on the precipice of leading a company valued at over $1 billion. The lobby was buzzing with excitement. Employees from both Horizon and Axion mingled, many meeting in person for the first time after weeks of virtual collaboration. I greeted them warmly, remembering names and projects, connecting people who would work together in the newly merged organization. At 10 a.m., everyone gathered in the main conference center for the formal announcement. Richard took the stage first, highlighting the strategic benefits of the merger, thanking key players who had made it possible. Notably absent from his remarks was any mention of Tom, whose role had been systematically erased from the merger narrative. "And now," Richard said, his voice carrying across the packed room, "I have a second announcement. As many of you know, I've been considering retirement. For some time, with this merger successfully completed, the time is right for new leadership to take Horizon Axion forward into its next chapter." A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd. While executive leadership had been informed, most employees were hearing this for the first time. It gives me great pleasure to announce that the board has unanimously selected Rebecca Morgan as my successor. Effective immediately, Rebecca will assume the role of Chief Executive Officer. The applause was thunderous. I rose from my seat in the front row and joined Richard on stage, accepting his handshake and the ceremonial passing of a small crystal horizon line, the company's traditional symbol of leadership transition. As I faced the audience, my employees now, I felt a surge of emotion, pride in what I'd accomplished, gratitude for those who had stood by me, and yes, a visceral satisfaction in having triumphed over Tom's machinations. "Thank you, Richard, for your mentorship and for building the foundation upon which we'll continue to grow," I began, "and thank you to everyone who has contributed to bringing us to this historic moment." I spoke for about 10 minutes, outlining my vision for the company's future, the opportunities created by the merger, and my commitment to fostering innovation and collaboration. I didn't mention the personal drama that had preceded this moment. That wasn't what today was about. As the formal ceremony concluded and people began to disperse toward the celebration luncheon, Harold approached me with a broad smile. "Congratulations, CEO Morgan," he said, shaking my hand. "How does it feel?" "Surreal," I admitted. "But right." "I have something for you," he said, handing me a small envelope. "A board tradition. Each new CEO receives a note from each board. Member, advice, encouragement, whatever they wish to share." I thanked him, tucking the envelope into my portfolio to read later in private. At the luncheon, I circulated among the tables, connecting with as many employees as possible. Several Axion executives who had initially been skeptical about the merger sought me out to express their enthusiasm about working together. Clients called throughout the day to offer congratulations and, more importantly, to reaffirm their commitment to our newly expanded company. Late in the afternoon, as the celebrations wound down, Olivia found me in a quiet corner. "The Denver Business Journal wants an interview," she said. "Their headline is, 'From Marketing Executive to CEO in 1 month, the remarkable rise of Rebecca.'" "Morgan," I smiled slightly at the oversimplification. "They're missing quite a few chapters in that story. You could tell them the full version," Olivia suggested with a mischievous grin. "On our anniversary, he left me for his secretary. A month later, I became CEO of his company. Now that's a headline." We both laughed, the absurdity of the situation finally striking me fully. My husband had conspired with his secretary to push me out of the company and end our marriage. Instead, I'd taken his dream job while he faced potential prison time. "I think I'll keep the personal drama out of the business press," I said, "but schedule the interview for next week." We should capitalize on the positive publicity for the merger. As the day drew to a close, I found myself alone in what was now my office. The CEO's corner suite with its panoramic views of Denver and the Rocky Mountains beyond. Richard had already cleared out his personal items, leaving only a handwritten note. "The office is yours. Make it your own. Make us proud." I unpacked the small box of items I'd brought up from my previous office, my marketing awards, a photo of my parents, the first advertisement I'd ever created for Horizon Tech. Then I added something new. A small frame containing a fortune cookie message I'd received the day after discovering Tom's betrayal. "Your greatest strength will emerge when you are tested." How right that had been. I sat at the desk, my desk, now, and opened the envelope Harold had given me. Inside were 9 note cards, one from each board member. I read them slowly, touched by their confidence in me, their wisdom, their specific insights into leadership challenges I would face. The last card was from Harold himself. It read simply, "The best revenge is not just success. It's creating something your adversaries could never have built themselves. You've already begun." As the sunset painted the Denver skyline in shades of gold and purple, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. 1 month ago, I'd discovered my husband's ultimate betrayal on our anniversary. Today, I sat in the CEO's office of a billion-dollar company. Tom had wanted to write my ending. Instead, he'd only succeeded in propelling me toward a new beginning, one far greater than either of us had imagined possible. I picked up my phone and texted Jen, "CEO's office, champagne. You, me, Olivia. Tonight, we celebrate." Her response came immediately. "On my way with the good stuff. You did it, Becca." I had done it. Not just survived, but thrived. Turned betrayal into triumph. Found strength in my darkest moment. And this was only the beginning. 3 months into my role as CEO of Horizon Axion, I stood at the window of my corner office watching snow begin to fall over Denver. The first winter storm of the season was arriving, turning the city into a postcard-perfect scene. Behind me, my executive team waited patiently around the conference table, quarterly reports spread before them. "The integration is proceeding. Ahead of schedule," Olivia was saying, pride evident in her voice. As my newly appointed Chief Operating Officer, she had taken point on merging our 2 corporate cultures. Employee satisfaction scores show 84% approval of the new structure, well above industry standard for post-merger organizations. I turned from the window, surveying the faces around the table. Some I'd worked with for years, at Horizon. Others had come from Axion, initially wary, but now fully committed to our shared vision. And a few were new recruits, top talent lured from competitors by the excitement surrounding our combined company. "Marketing has exceeded targets. By 22%, continued James Fletcher, the former Axion executive who now headed our expanded marketing division. Ms. Morgan's previous campaigns provided a strong foundation that we've built upon successfully." "Please, it's still Rebecca," I reminded him with a smile. "Save the formality for the board meetings." The quarterly results were undeniable. While most merged companies struggled with integration issues and saw temporary performance drops, Horizon Axion was thriving. Our stock had risen 18% since the merger announcement. Client retention stood at 97%, and the cloud security platform I'd championed before becoming CEO had just landed us a government contract worth $40 million annually. "Let's discuss the elephant in the room," I said, after we'd reviewed all the departmental reports. "The Preston lawsuit." The mood in the room shifted perceptibly. Daniel Preston had been Tom's closest ally on his executive team, a finance director who'd been passed over for the CFO position after Tom's dismissal. 3 weeks ago, he'd filed a wrongful termination suit, claiming he was fired for raising concerns about the new CEO's qualifications and decision-making. Martin Graves, our new general counsel, cleared his throat. The lawsuit is without merit. Preston was terminated for cause after the audit committee discovered he had assisted in concealing financial irregularities under the previous CFO's direction. But the optics aren't great, I acknowledged. A male executive claiming gender bias against the new female CEO makes for attention-grabbing headlines, regardless of the facts. The legal team is confident we'll prevail, Martin assured me. But I recommend settling quickly to avoid prolonged negative publicity. We've prepared a reasonable offer that includes a non-disclosure agreement. I considered this, tapping my pen against the table. What's your assessment, Victor? Victor Chen, Harold's nephew and our brilliant new CFO, looked up from his tablet. From a financial perspective, settling makes sense. The amount is immaterial to our balance sheet, and it eliminates a distraction. However, it might be interpreted as an admission of weakness, he said carefully. Preston was part of Tom Morgan's inner circle. There are still people in the industry who believe his narrative that you somehow orchestrated a coup to take over the company. I nodded, unsurprised. Despite the overwhelming evidence of Tom's embezzlement and conspiracy, there remained a cohort of business leaders, primarily older men, who viewed my ascension with suspicion. The old boys' network closing ranks around one of their own, even a disgraced one. Let's split the difference, I decided. Prepare the settlement agreement, but include explicit language that we deny all allegations and are settling solely to avoid distraction from our mission. And leak to the financial press that the settlement amount is significantly less than what Preston demanded. Martin made notes. We'll have it ready by end of day. After concluding the meeting, I asked Olivia to stay behind. Once the room had cleared, she settled into the chair across from my desk. You look tired, she observed bluntly. One of the many reasons I valued Olivia was her refusal to treat me differently now that I was CEO. I am tired, I admitted. The Denver business. Journal ran another profile piece on me yesterday. Third one this quarter. I saw it. The Phoenix CEO, how Rebecca Morgan rose from the ashes of personal betrayal. Quite the dramatic headline. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. I'm getting frustrated with being defined by what Tom did. It's always the executive whose husband tried to sabotage her career, or from betrayed wife to boardroom powerhouse. Never just effective CEO driving exceptional results. Olivia considered this. It makes a compelling narrative. Woman. Discovers husband's betrayal, outsmarts his schemes, takes his dream job. People love that story. Well, I'm ready for a new story, I said firmly. One that doesn't include Tom Morgan in the headline. Speaking of Tom, Olivia said carefully, have you heard the latest? My stomach tightened. No, what now? He's accepted a plea deal. No jail time, but full restitution of the embezzled funds, 5 years probation, and permanent revocation of his CPA license. The news hit me with unexpected force. Part of me had wanted to see Tom face jail time for what he'd done, not just to me, but to the company and the shareholders who had trusted him. Another part felt oddly relieved that this chapter might finally close. And Natalie? I asked, referring to his former assistant and accomplice. Similar deal, with less restitution since she benefited less from the scheme. She's apparently moved to Phoenix. Started over. I nodded, processing this information. Thank you for telling me. After Olivia left, I turned back to the window, watching the snow fall more heavily now. The plea deal meant Tom would soon be a free man, albeit one with a destroyed reputation and career. I wondered briefly where he would go, what he would do. Then I deliberately pushed those thoughts aside. Tom Morgan no longer deserved space in my mind. My intercom buzzed. Ms. Morgan, Jennifer Williams is here to see you. Jen walked in moments later, snowflakes melting in her dark hair, carrying a sleek portfolio and wearing an expression that meant business. "Please tell me you're here as my friend and not as my lawyer," I said as she shed her coat. "Can it be both?" she replied, setting her portfolio on my desk. "The divorce is final. Just got confirmation from the judge an hour ago." I felt a curious lightness, as if a weight I'd grown accustomed to carrying had suddenly been lifted. "So I'm officially no longer Rebecca Morgan, betrayed wife." "Nope. Now you're just Rebecca Morgan, youngest female CEO of a Fortune 500 tech company, recently named to Denver Business Journal's 40 Under 40 list, and coincidentally my best friend who needs to get out more." I laughed despite myself. I get out. "Board meetings and client dinners don't count," Jen countered, perching on the edge of my desk. "When was the last time you did something just for fun?" I started to protest, then realized I couldn't remember. The month since becoming CEO had been consumed by work, integrating the companies, reassuring nervous clients, recruiting key executives, putting out the inevitable fires that come with major organizational change. Even my weekends had been filled with catching up on email and preparing for the week ahead. "That's what I thought," Jen said, noting my silence. "Lucky for you, I've come with a proposition. My brother Michael is hosting a charity gala for the Children's Hospital next weekend. Black tie, silent auction, the works. You need to be there." "Jen, I appreciate the thought, but I have the quarterly board presentation to prepare and it can wait one night," she interrupted firmly. "This isn't just about socializing. The gala will be full of potential clients, investors, and community leaders who should meet the new head of one of Denver's largest employers. It's networking disguised as fun." She knew exactly how to frame it to make me considerate. "Fine," I conceded. "Send me the details." "Already did. My assistant coordinated with yours. Your ticket is purchased, your calendar is blocked, and Olivia has agreed you won't be disturbed unless the building is literally on fire." I shook my head, amused and slightly annoyed at being managed so efficiently. "Anything else you've arranged? For me without asking?" Jen's expression shifted, becoming slightly hesitant. "Actually, yes. Remember Marcus Davies? Your brother's college roommate, the architect? The very successful, very single architect who just moved back to Denver. After 10 years in Chicago, he'll be at the gala too, and he specifically asked if you would be there." I groaned. "Jen, no, I'm not ready for that." "It's not a setup," she insisted. "Just two professionals who might enjoy each other's company at a charity event. You don't have to marry the guy, just have an intelligent conversation with someone outside your executive team." Before I could argue further, my assistant knocked and entered with an apologetic look. "Sorry to interrupt, but your 4 o'clock is here. The delegation from the Singapore office?" I glanced at my watch, surprised at how quickly the afternoon had passed. "Show them in. Jen, we'll finish this conversation later." "There's nothing to finish," she said cheerfully, gathering her things. "You're going to the gala, period." She squeezed my shoulder as she passed. "Congratulations on the divorce, by the way. Freedom looks good on you." The week passed in a blur of meetings, decisions, and strategy sessions. Despite my initial reluctance, I found myself looking forward to the charity gala. Jen was right. I needed to engage with the broader business community, not just for networking purposes, but to begin establishing my own identity in Denver beyond the company and the scandal that had preceded my appointment as CEO. Saturday evening found me in my dressing room, surveying my reflection critically. The midnight blue gown was elegant without being flashy, projecting exactly the image I wanted: confident, sophisticated, and firmly in control of my life. I'd deliberately chosen something different from anything I'd worn during my marriage to Tom. New chapter, new wardrobe. My driver, Carlos, arrived precisely on time. "Looking lovely this evening, Ms. Morgan," he said as he held the car door. "Thank you, Carlos. And thank you for coming in on a Saturday night." He smiled. "Happy to do it. My wife says it's good to see you getting out and enjoying yourself." I'd forgotten that Carlos's wife, Elena, worked in our HR department. Of course, the staff had been discussing my personal life. I was simultaneously touched by their concern and uncomfortable with being the subject of their speculation. The Children's Hospital Gala was being held at the Riverfront Center, its glass facade illuminated in soft purple lighting for the event. As Carlos pulled up to the entrance, I could see photographers documenting the arrivals of Denver's business elite and social figures. This would be my first major public appearance that wasn't directly related to Horizon Axion. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and stepped out into the crisp winter evening. "Ms. Morgan, Rebecca, over here." The photographers had spotted me, their cameras turning in my direction. I offered a practiced smile, pausing briefly for photos before moving toward the entrance. Jen had warned me there would be press coverage. The newest female CEO in Denver was still a novelty worth documenting. Inside, the ballroom had been transformed into a winter wonderland, with crystal decorations catching the light and creating the impression of an ice palace. Circular tables surrounded a dance floor, each immaculately set with white linens and centerpieces of silver branches and tiny lights. "Rebecca!" Michael Williams, Jen's brother, approached with a warm smile. Unlike his sister who had pursued law, Michael had built a successful investment firm specializing in medical technology. "Wonderful to see you. Thank you for supporting the hospital. It's a worthy cause," I replied sincerely. "Horizon Axion is committed to being a responsible corporate citizen." "Always the CEO," he teased good-naturedly. "Come, there are people who've been asking about you." For the next hour, I circulated through the crowd, engaging in the delicate dance of social networking. I accepted congratulations on the merger's success, deflected questions about Tom's legal troubles, and highlighted Horizon Axion's recent accomplishments and future plans. It was exhausting, but necessary. "You look like you could use a break," came a deep voice from behind me after I'd extracted myself from a particularly persistent venture capitalist. I turned to find a tall man with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair, holding 2 champagne flutes. Marcus Davies. "Your reputation for good timing is well deserved," I said, accepting one of the glasses. "Thank you." "Jen mentioned you might need rescuing at some point," he admitted. "Mind if we find somewhere a bit quieter to talk?" I followed him to a less crowded area near the windows overlooking the illuminated river. The city lights reflected on the water's surface, creating a magical effect against the night sky. "So," he said after we'd both taken a sip of champagne, "I'm under strict instructions from Jennifer not to mention your ex-husband, your CEO position, or ask how you're doing after everything that's happened. Which leaves me with commenting on the weather or asking about your hobbies, which I suspect you haven't had time for lately." I laughed, genuinely amused by his frankness. Jen has always been subtle. "About as subtle as a bulldozer," he agreed with a warm smile. "But she means well, and she's worried about you." "I know, everyone is, but I'm fine, really." "I didn't ask," he pointed out gently. "Right, sorry." I took another sip of champagne. "Let's try again. Tell me about your work in Chicago. Jen mentioned you've just moved back to Denver?" For the next half hour, we talked easily about his architectural projects, the differences between Chicago and Denver, and our shared love of the mountains. I found myself relaxing for the first time in months, enjoying a conversation that had nothing to do with quarterly projections or integration timelines. "I should warn you," Marcus said after a while. "We're being watched." I tensed slightly. "Photographers?" "Worse. Jen and Michael, trying very hard to look like they're not monitoring our interaction." I glanced across the room to see Jen quickly look away, pretending to be fascinated by whatever Michael was saying. "She's incorrigible," I sighed. But well-intentioned, Marcus replied. She cares about you a great deal. When she heard what happened. Well, let's just say your ex-husband's name became an expletive in the Williams family vocabulary. Despite my rule about not discussing, Tom, I found myself smiling at this. Jen was my rock through everything. I wouldn't have made it without her. I doubt that, Marcus said, surprising me. From what I've observed tonight, you're remarkably resilient. Everyone here is talking about how impressively you've handled both personal and professional challenges. Before I could respond, the evening's MC announced that dinner would be served shortly. Marcus glanced at his watch. I'm at table 12, he said. You? Table 1, I replied, remembering my placement with the event's major sponsors and hospital board members. Duty calls? He nodded understandingly. Perhaps after dinner? I found myself wanting to continue our conversation. I'd like that. As I made my way to my assigned table, I was stopped by an older woman with elegantly coiffed silver hair, whom I recognized as Barbara Harrington, one of Denver's most prominent philanthropists. Rebecca Morgan, she said warmly, taking my hands in hers. I've been hoping to meet you. Your leadership at Horizon Axion has been quite impressive. Thank you, Mrs. Harrington. That means a great deal coming from you. Please call me Barbara. I've been following your story with great interest. Not many women could have turned such adversity into triumph so gracefully. I managed not to wince at yet another reference to my story. I'm fortunate to have an exceptional team, I deflected politely. Indeed, but a company reflects its leadership, she insisted. I'm on the board of the Women's Leadership Coalition. We're hosting a conference in April, and we'd be honored if you would consider being our keynote speaker. This caught me by surprise. The WLC was an influential organization dedicated to advancing women in business and public service. Their annual conference drew participants from across the country. I'd be delighted, I said sincerely. Wonderful. My assistant will contact yours to arrange the details. She lowered her voice confidentially. Between us, dear, some of the old guard were skeptical when you were appointed CEO so quickly after the unpleasantness. But you've proven them wrong at every turn. We need more women like you showing the way forward. As dinner progressed, I found myself engaged in substantive conversations about healthcare technology, corporate philanthropy, and economic development. For the first time since becoming CEO, I felt people were seeing me as a business leader in my own right, not just Tom Morgan's ex-wife who had improbably ended up with his job. After dinner came the silent auction results and dancing. I was studying the auction items when I felt a presence beside me. See anything worth bidding on? Marcus asked. I've already won the weekend at Vail, I admitted. For my parents' anniversary. They never take time for themselves. Thoughtful, he noted, and generous. Those packages don't come cheap. It's for a good cause. And frankly, after the year I've had, it feels good to do something positive with my resources. The band began playing a slow jazz standard. Marcus hesitated, then asked, Would you care to dance? I hesitated. Dancing with an attractive man at a public event would certainly generate gossip, possibly even photos in the society pages. But hadn't I just been complaining about being defined by my past with Tom? Perhaps it was time to visibly move forward. I'd love to, I said, setting down my champagne glass. As we moved onto the dance floor, I was acutely aware of the eyes following us. Marcus was a good dancer, maintaining a respectful distance while guiding me confidently through the steps. Everyone's watching, I murmured. Let them, he replied simply. You deserve to enjoy an evening out without worrying about what others think. Is it that simple? It can be, if you allow it to be. As we continued dancing, I gradually relaxed, allowing myself to enjoy the moment, the music, the movement, the simple pleasure of human connection without agenda or ulterior motive. When the song ended, Marcus stepped back, his expression warm, but undemanding. "Thank you for the dance, Rebecca. I should make the rounds before the evening ends, but I've enjoyed our conversation immensely." "As have I," I replied honestly. "Perhaps we could continue it sometime? Dinner, maybe?" I considered his invitation. Was I ready to start dating again? The divorce was final as of this week. Professionally, I was secure. Perhaps it was time to reclaim my personal life as well. "I'd like that," I said finally. "But fair warning, my schedule is challenging." He smiled. "Mine too. But I suspect if something matters enough, we both know how to make time for it." After exchanging contact information, we parted ways. I found Jen almost immediately at my elbow, trying and failing to look casual. "Not a word," I warned her, though I couldn't suppress a smile. "I didn't say anything," she protested innocently. "Though if I were to say something, it might be that you two looked good together on the dance floor. It was one dance. And hopefully dinner soon," she suggested hopefully. I shook my head at her persistence but didn't deny it. "Let's focus on the positive outcomes from tonight beyond your matchmaking efforts. Barbara Harrington invited me to keynote the WLC conference." "That's fantastic!" Jen exclaimed. "The perfect platform to establish your voice as a business leader separate from the Horizon Axion story." Exactly what I was thinking. As the evening wound down, I found myself feeling lighter than I had in months. The networking had been productive, the cause worthwhile, and the interactions, particularly with Marcus, had reminded me that there was life beyond the executive suite. Carlos was waiting with the car when I decided to leave. As we pulled away from the riverfront center, my phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. "Thank you for making an obligation into an unexpected pleasure. Sleep well. Marcus." I smiled, tucking the phone away without responding immediately. Tomorrow would be soon enough for that. Tonight had been about remembering who Rebecca Morgan was beyond her title and her past. A woman capable of enjoying an evening out, making new connections, and perhaps even opening herself to new possibilities. 3 months ago, I had become CEO of Horizon Axion, turning my ex-husband's betrayal into an unprecedented opportunity. Tonight, I had taken another step forward, not as a wronged wife or a surprise CEO, but simply as myself. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, I felt truly free to chart my own course without the shadow of Tom's actions defining me. As we drove through the quiet, snow-dusted streets of Denver, I found myself looking forward rather than back. Tomorrow would bring new challenges at Horizon Axion. The coming weeks would include finalizing our strategic plan, presenting to the board, and continuing to prove I deserved the confidence placed in me. But perhaps they would also include dinner with an interesting architect, more community engagement, and the gradual reclaiming of the personal space I'd surrendered to professional demands. The car turned onto my street, the lights of my downtown loft visible in the distance. Home. Not the home I'd shared with Tom, but the one I'd created for myself. Elegant, modern, and unburdened by painful memories. A new chapter was truly beginning, one entirely of my own writing. "Rebecca Morgan to the main stage, please. 5 minutes until your keynote." I nodded to the event coordinator, a young woman with a clipboard and an earpiece who'd been hovering nearby since my arrival at the Women's Leadership Coalition Conference. The Denver Convention Center hummed with the energy of 1,200 female executives, entrepreneurs, and aspiring business leaders gathered for the annual event. "Your presentation is loaded and ready," my assistant Claire confirmed, handing me a bottle of water. "And I've prepared notes on the key attendees in the front rows." I smiled gratefully. "What would I do without you?" "Probably still excel, but with slightly less detailed briefing materials," she replied with the dry humor that had made her invaluable over the past 6 months. This keynote had taken on outsized importance in my calendar. After a year as CEO of Axion, I was finally feeling secure in my leadership role. The merger integration was complete. Our financial results had exceeded analyst expectations for 3 consecutive quarters, and employee satisfaction scores had reached their highest levels in company history. Yet public perception remained stubbornly focused on how I'd obtained the position, the betrayal, the boardroom drama, the soap opera elements that made for compelling headlines. This speech represented an opportunity to definitively shift the narrative. From backstage, I could see the audience filing into the grand ballroom. Many faces I recognized from industry events, board meetings, and business publications. Some had been skeptical of my appointment, viewing it as a publicity stunt or an overreaction to my ex-husband's misdeeds. Others had been supportive from the beginning, recognizing my contributions to Horizon Tech before the merger. 2 minutes, the coordinator announced. I took a deep breath, reviewing my opening lines one final time. The presentation had gone through 12 drafts before I was satisfied. It needed to be personal without being confessional, authoritative without being arrogant, and forward-looking without ignoring the unusual circumstances of my ascension to CEO. "You'll be brilliant," came a familiar voice. I turned to see Marcus, approaching, looking handsome in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. After 6 months of dating, fitting dinners, weekend hikes, and occasional theater outings into our demanding schedules, his presence had become a source of steady support in my life. "I didn't know you were coming," I said, genuinely surprised. He'd mentioned a critical client meeting in Boulder that would prevent him from attending. "Rescheduled," he explained with a warm smile. "Some things take priority. Besides, I wanted to see the moment when you officially rewrite your narrative." His understanding of what this speech meant to me was one of the many reasons our relationship had progressed from casual dating to something deeper. Marcus never treated me as a curiosity or a trophy, the female CEO with the dramatic backstory. He saw me as a whole person, with ambitions, insecurities, strengths, and occasional moments of vulnerability that I showed to very few people. "Front row, just left of center," he added. "I'll be the one giving you the completely objective standing." Ovation at the end. The event coordinator appeared again, gesturing urgently. 30 seconds, Ms. Morgan." I squeezed Marcus's hand, took a final sip of water, and moved to the stage entrance. The lights dimmed in the ballroom as Barbara Harrington approached the podium to introduce me. "It is my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker," her voice carried clearly through the sound system. When we extended this invitation 6 months ago, we knew we were getting an impressive business leader. What we couldn't have anticipated was just how transformative her first year as CEO would prove to be. Barbara continued with highlights of my career and Axion's recent successes. I noted with appreciation that she made no mention of Tom or the scandal that had preceded my appointment. Perhaps the tide was finally turning. "Please join me in welcoming to the stage the Chief Executive Officer of Axion, Rebecca Morgan." Applause filled the ballroom as I walked confidently to the podium. My gaze swept over the audience, noting familiar faces. Olivia and several other Axion executives, Jen sitting beside her brother Michael, and Marcus, true to his word, in the front row offering an encouraging smile. "Thank you, Barbara, for that generous introduction," I began. "And thank you to the Women's Leadership Coalition for the important work you do in advancing female leadership across industries." I paused, looking out at the sea of faces. I was asked to speak today about leadership in times of transition. It's a topic I've become intimately familiar with, though not in the way I might have expected. Without directly referencing the scandal, I wove a narrative about organizational transformation, speaking candidly about the challenges of stepping into a leadership role during tumultuous circumstances. I shared insights about building trust, establishing authority, and creating a vision that could unite even skeptical stakeholders. When I became CEO, many questioned whether I had the experience necessary for the role, I acknowledged. Others wondered if I could overcome the circumstances of my appointment to truly lead effectively. Valid concerns, certainly. But they missed a crucial point. Sometimes our greatest strengths emerge precisely from our most difficult experiences. As I continued, I could feel the audience's engagement deepening. This wasn't just another executive sharing corporate platitudes. This was a real conversation about resilience, adaptation, and authentic leadership. The most powerful question I've learned to ask isn't what happened to me, but rather, what happens through me, I said as I approached my conclusion. Leadership isn't about the title or the corner office. It's about creating impact that extends beyond yourself. It's about building something that outlasts any individual crisis or triumph. I spoke for exactly the allotted 30 minutes, finishing with a call to action for women to support one another while pursuing their own authentic leadership paths. The applause that followed was enthusiastic and sustained. As predicted, Marcus was the first to stand, but others quickly followed until the entire ballroom was on its feet. The remainder of the conference passed in a blur of panel discussions, networking conversations, and meaningful connections. By late afternoon, I was mentally exhausted but deeply satisfied. Multiple attendees had approached me to discuss the speech, focusing on the leadership principles rather than my personal saga. "You've officially turned the page," Jen declared, when we finally had a moment alone during the closing reception. No one mentioned Tom or the scandal once in my hearing all day. It was all about your vision for Horizon Axion and your leadership philosophy. That's exactly what I wanted, I admitted, relief evident in my voice. To be defined by what I'm building, not by what happened to me. Well, mission accomplished. But now we need to discuss something else entirely. Her expression turned mischievous. "Marcus hasn't taken his eyes off you all day." I glanced across the room where Marcus was engaged in conversation with Michael, occasionally looking in my direction with a warmth that still caught me off guard. "We're in a good place," I said simply. "A good place?" Rebecca Morgan, CEO extraordinaire, master of corporate communication, and that's the best you can do? A good place? I laughed at her exasperation. "What do you want me to say? That after a devastating betrayal and divorce, I've somehow found someone who makes me feel both challenged and supported? Someone who understands my commitment to Horizon Axion without feeling threatened by it? Someone you're falling in love with," Jen suggested softly. The question gave me pause. After Tom's betrayal, I directed careful emotional boundaries, focusing my energy on professional achievements rather than personal relationships. Marcus had respected those boundaries from the beginning, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. But somewhere between museum dates, mountain hikes, and late-night conversations about everything from architectural theory to childhood memories, those boundaries had begun to dissolve. "Maybe," I admitted, "but it's complicated. The company is still my priority." "It doesn't have to be either or," Jen pointed out. "You've proven you can lead Horizon Axion brilliantly. Perhaps it's time to prove you can balance that with personal happiness too." Before I could respond, Barbara Harrington approached, accompanied by a distinguished-looking woman I recognized as Catherine Reynolds, CEO of one of the country's largest healthcare systems. "Rebecca, your speech was exactly what this conference needed," Barbara said warmly. "Catherine was particularly impressed and wanted to meet you." "Your insights on transitional leadership resonated deeply," Catherine said, shaking my hand. "We're currently exploring cloud solutions for our multi-state operations. I'd love to have a conversation about how Horizon Axion might help us modernize our systems." We exchanged contact information, agreeing to set up a meeting the following week. As they moved on to greet other attendees, I caught Jen's knowing smile. "What?" I asked. "Just observing that success is the best revenge," she replied. "One stellar keynote, one potential major client, and not a single mention of you-know-who. Later that evening, Marcus and I walked along Denver's 16th Street Mall, the spring air carrying a hint of the mountains. The pedestrian thoroughfare was alive with street performers, diners at outdoor cafes, and the distinctive energy of a city evening. "So, CEO Morgan, how does it feel to definitively change the conversation?" Marcus asked, his hand comfortably entwined with mine. "Liberating," I admitted. "For the first time in a year, I feel like people are seeing me clearly, not through the lens of scandal or curiosity. People who matter have always seen you clearly," he pointed out. "Your team at Horizon Axion, the board members who supported your appointment, your friends." He paused. "Me." We stopped walking, turning to face each other. The streetlights illuminated his expression, open, appreciative, patient. "Thank you for coming today," I said softly. "It meant more than you know." "I wouldn't have missed it," he replied simply. "You were magnificent up there. Not because of what happened a year ago, but because of who you are. Brilliant, resilient, visionary." Something shifted in that moment, a recognition that we'd reached an important juncture. For months, I'd kept a part of myself guarded, focusing on rebuilding my professional identity while allowing our relationship to develop slowly. "I'm not very good at this," I admitted, "balancing work and everything else." "You've had good reason to be cautious," he acknowledged, "and I've been happy to move at whatever pace felt right for you." "But?" I prompted, sensing more. "But I find myself hoping for more of your time, more of your thoughts, more of you." His honesty was refreshing after years of Tom's calculated manipulations. "I'm falling in love with you, Rebecca. I think I have been since that first conversation at the charity gala." The words hung between us, not demanding an immediate response but offering a truth too important to remain unspoken. "I'm scared," I confessed, the admission feeling both vulnerable and freeing. "Not of you, but of trusting my own judgment again. Of potentially dividing my focus when Horizon Axion still needs so much from me." "I understand that," he said gently. "But consider this. A life compartmentalized isn't necessarily a life well lived. You're brilliant at your job, Rebecca. That wouldn't change if you allowed yourself to pursue personal happiness too." His words echoed Jen's earlier observation, striking a chord I couldn't ignore. For the past year, I'd channeled all my energy into proving myself as CEO, perhaps at the expense of rebuilding other aspects of my life. "I'm falling in love with you too," I said finally, the truth of it washing over me with surprising clarity. "And that terrifies me almost as much as it excites me." His smile was worth every moment of fear I'd pushed through to speak those words. "Then we'll figure it out together, at whatever pace works for both of us." We continued our walk, discussing possibilities rather than making specific plans. Marcus understood the demands of my position, the travel requirements, the late nights, the constant pressure. His own architectural firm was growing, bringing similar challenges. We were both accustomed to dedication and sacrifice for professional achievement. But perhaps we agreed there was room for more. 2 days later, I sat in my office reviewing the quarterly results that would be presented to the board the following week. The numbers were impressive. Revenue up 28% year over year, operating margins improving, customer retention exceeding industry benchmarks. Horizon Axion had not just survived the tumultuous transition, it had thrived. My intercom buzzed. "Ms. Morgan, Harold Chen is here to see you." Harold entered moments later, looking distinguished as always in his perfectly tailored suit. As the board member who had championed my appointment, he had become both mentor and ally over the past year. "Impressive speech at the WLC conference," he said without preamble, settling into the chair across from my desk. "You've effectively rewritten the narrative around your leadership." That was the goal, I acknowledged. Though I'm still Rebecca Morgan, the CEO whose husband tried to sabotage her to many people. Perhaps, Harold conceded. But increasingly, you're Rebecca Morgan, the CEO who transformed Horizon Axion into a market leader. Results speak for themselves. He gestured to the reports on my desk, and those results are remarkable by any standard. Thank you. The team has been exceptional. Teams reflect their leadership, he observed, which brings me to the purpose of my visit. He hesitated briefly. The board's compensation committee met yesterday to discuss your performance review and contract renewal. I straightened slightly. My initial appointment had been for a 1-year term, standard for a CEO named under unusual circumstances. The board had the option to extend the contract or begin searching for a replacement. While our results were strong, corporate governance often followed its own logic. I see, I said carefully, maintaining a neutral expression. And their assessment? Harold's serious expression gave way to a warm smile. They're prepared to offer you a 5-year contract with significantly enhanced compensation. The vote was unanimous, Rebecca. Even James Peterson, who initially opposed your appointment, has become your strongest advocate. Relief and pride surged through me. A 5-year contract represented unequivocal confidence in my leadership, not as a temporary fix following a scandal, but as the right person to guide Horizon Axion's long-term future. That's extraordinary, I managed. Thank you, Harold. Please convey my appreciation to the committee. There's more, he continued. The board would like to separate the CEO and president roles, with you maintaining CEO while we recruit a president to handle some of the operational responsibilities. This would allow you to focus more on strategic vision and key client relationships, areas where you've demonstrated particular strength. The restructuring made sense. As the company had grown, the combined demands of strategic leadership and day-to-day operations had become increasingly challenging to balance. A president focusing on execution would complement my strengths while providing necessary support. I assume Olivia would be considered for the president role, I asked, thinking of my exceptional COO. She would be a strong internal candidate, Harold confirmed, though we would conduct a thorough search to ensure we have the right fit. After discussing additional details, Harold left me to consider the offer. I stood at my office window, looking out at the Denver skyline, reflecting on the journey of the past year. From the devastating discovery of Tom's betrayal to this moment of profound professional validation, the contrast was almost poetic. My phone chimed with a text from Marcus. Dinner tonight? New Japanese place downtown? My treat to celebrate your WLC triumph. I smiled, typing back, yes, and I might have something else to celebrate too. 5-year contract just offered. His response was immediate, incredibly well-deserved. Now, we definitely need the premium sack. His excitement for my success, genuine, untainted by jealousy or comparison, was yet another reminder of how different this relationship was from my marriage to Tom. Where Tom had seen my achievements as threats to his own standing, Marcus viewed them as reasons for celebration. The remainder of the afternoon passed in a flurry of meetings and decisions. At 5:30, I met with Olivia to share the news about the potential organizational restructuring. President of Horizon Axion, she mused, considering the possibility. That has a nice ring to it. You'd be perfect for it, I said sincerely. No one understands our operations better, and you've been crucial to the merger's success. I appreciate the vote of confidence, she replied. Though I assume there will be a formal process? Absolutely. The board will conduct a thorough search, but I won't pretend you wouldn't be my first choice. Olivia smiled. Well, I'm honored to be considered, and even more pleased about your 5-year contract. The company needs your vision, Rebecca. After she left, I took a moment to call my parents, sharing the news of the contract offer. Their pride was palpable even over the phone. They had stood by me through the darkest days after Tom's betrayal, never doubting my ability to rise above the circumstances. "We always knew you were destined for extraordinary things," my mother said. "Even when you were selling homemade bookmarks door to door at 7 years old." I laughed at the memory. "That was just to earn money for a new bike." "It was entrepreneurship," she insisted, "and determination, the same qualities that guided you through this past year." At 7, I met Marcus at the Japanese restaurant, a sleek space with minimalist decor and an acclaimed chef who had recently relocated from Tokyo. He was waiting at the bar, rising to greet me with a warm embrace. "Congratulations," he said, his pride evident. A 5-year contract is a resounding vote of confidence. Over dinner, I shared more details about the board's proposal, including the potential restructuring of the executive team. Marcus listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions about what the changes would mean for my role and workload. "So, theoretically," he observed as we finished our main course, "this new structure might actually give you more flexibility, less day-to-day firefighting, more strategic focus." "Theoretically," I agreed, though I've learned that CEO responsibilities have a way of expanding to fill all available time if you let them. But perhaps that's a choice rather than an inevitability," he suggested gently. "Maybe this is an opportunity to redefine what success looks like for you, professionally and personally." I considered his words, recognizing the truth in them. For the past year, I had deliberately immersed myself in work, using the demanding CEO role as both shield and purpose during a painful personal transition. The strategy had been necessary and effective, but was it still serving me well? "What would that look like?" I asked, as much to myself as to him. "Redefining success?" "Only you can answer that," Marcus replied. "But I'd imagine it includes continuing to lead Horizon Axion brilliantly, while also making space for other aspects of life that bring you joy. Time with friends and family, pursuit of interests beyond the boardroom. Perhaps," he added with a warm smile, "even more nights like this one." As we shared dessert, a delicate green tea panna cotta, I found myself imagining a future with more balance than I'd permitted myself to consider. The 5-year contract offered security and validation. The restructured executive team would provide operational support. Perhaps Marcus was right. This was an opportunity to redefine success on my own terms. "I have something for you," Marcus said as we finished our tea. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small box. My heart stuttered momentarily before he clarified, "Not that kind of box. At least not yet. Though I hope someday, when you're ready." He left the thought unfinished, handing me the gift. Inside was an elegant silver key on a simple chain. "A key?" I questioned, looking up at him. "To my lake house," he explained. "I've noticed you never truly disconnect from work. Even on weekends, you're always accessible, always checking email. I thought perhaps having a place to escape might help. Somewhere with spotty cell service and an excellent view." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched me deeply. The lake house was Marcus's sanctuary, a modernist retreat he had designed himself in the mountains 2 hours from Denver. He had taken me there only once, for a day trip early in our relationship. I searched for the right words. "This means a lot, Marcus." "It's not a pressure to move in or make any major changes," he clarified. "Just an invitation to find moments of peace when you need them. Use it when you want, alone or together." I fastened the chain around my neck, the key resting just below my collarbone. It represented not just access to a physical space, but an invitation to consider a different way of living, one that made room for rest, reflection, and connection alongside ambition and achievement. As we walked to the valet stand after dinner, the spring evening warm enough to forego jackets, I felt a sense of possibility I hadn't experienced in years. The 5-year contract secured my professional future. Marcus's steady presence offered Emotional support, without demands or conditions. For the first time since discovering Tom's betrayal, I felt fully in control of both my career and my personal choices. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked, noting my thoughtful expression. "The future," I replied honestly, "and how different it looks from what I imagined a year ago." "Better or worse?" he asked. I considered the question, thinking about the leadership role I'd earned through determination and excellence, the respect I'd gained from industry peers, and the man beside me who understood both my strength and my occasional vulnerability. "Infinitely better," I answered, slipping my hand into his, though I never would have believed that possible in the moment. The valet brought our cars and we paused before parting for the evening. "Thank you for celebrating with me," I said, the words encompassing much more than dinner. "Always," he replied simply. Before I could turn to my car, he added, "Rebecca, I want you to know something. I understand that your career will always be central to your life. I would never ask you to diminish yourself or your ambitions. I just want to be part of the journey, whatever form that takes." In that moment, with the city lights surrounding us and the weight of a hard-earned 5-year contract validating my professional worth, I made a decision. The woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal on their anniversary had been devastated, but determined. The woman who had become CEO in the aftermath had been focused and formidable. But the woman I was becoming now, the one with both professional security and emotional possibility, could perhaps allow herself more than just success. She could allow herself joy. "The lake house," I said. "This weekend, both of us." His smile was worth any lingering uncertainty. "I'll pack the groceries if you'll bring the wine." As I drove home that night, the key resting against my skin, beneath my blouse, I reflected on the symmetry of the moment. 1 year after Tom's betrayal had shattered my personal life while inadvertently launching my executive career, I had secured both professional legacy and the possibility of personal happiness. Tom had intended to write my ending. Instead, he had merely set the stage for a beginning I never could have imagined, one where I defined success, controlled my narrative, and chose my own path forward, both as CEO and as a woman who had rediscovered her capacity for trust, joy, and perhaps even love. The betrayal that was meant to destroy me had instead become merely a chapter in a much longer, richer story, one that I was now writing entirely for myself. The morning sun painted Denver's skyline in hues of gold and amber as I stood at the podium, surveying the crowd of employees, board members, clients, and media representatives gathered for Horizon Axion's 5th anniversary celebration. 5 years since the merger that had transformed 2 promising tech companies into an industry powerhouse. 5 years since I had ascended to the CEO position under circumstances no leadership textbook could have prepared me for. "Welcome, everyone," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the state-of-the-art amphitheater we'd built as part of our expanded headquarters campus. "Today we celebrate not just the joining of 2 companies, but the creation of something entirely new, a vision, realized through the collective talents and dedication of every person in this room." From my vantage point, I could see familiar faces throughout the audience. Olivia, now president of Horizon Axion, managing our global operations with the same precision and insight that had made her invaluable during the integration. Harold Chen, still serving on our board despite numerous attempts by other companies to lure him away. Jen, who had recently become our chief legal officer after her previous firm merged with a competitor. And in the third row, slightly off-center, Marcus watched with quiet pride, our 18-month-old daughter Emma dozing against his shoulder, blissfully unaware of the significance of the moment. 5 years ago, many questioned whether this merger could succeed, I continued. The skeptics cited cultural differences, overlapping product lines, and yes, unusual leadership circumstances. This earned a knowing chuckle from those familiar with our history. Today, the numbers speak for themselves. I gestured to the massive screen behind me, where our key metrics appeared. Market valuation had tripled. Annual revenue had grown from $780 million to $3 billion. Our workforce had expanded from 3,200 to over 8,500 employees across 12 countries. Client retention stood at 94%, far exceeding industry averages. But the statistics, impressive as they are, tell only part of the story, I said, moving from behind the podium to stand closer to the audience. The true measure of our success lies in the innovations we've pioneered, the client challenges we've solved, and the workplace culture we've built together. For the next 20 minutes, I highlighted Horizon Axion's major achievements: the cloud security platform that had revolutionized data protection for healthcare systems, the artificial intelligence tools that had streamlined operations for manufacturing clients, the augmented reality solutions that were transforming architectural visualization. Each innovation represented countless hours of collaboration, creativity, and perseverance from teams across the organization. As we look to the future, I concluded, Horizon Axion stands ready to lead the next wave of technological transformation. Not because of any single product or patent, but because of the exceptional people who bring their best selves to work every day. Thank you for making these past 5 years extraordinary. The best is yet to come. The applause was thunderous, escalating to a standing ovation as board members joined me on stage for the ceremonial cutting of an enormous cake decorated with the company's logo. As I moved through the crowd afterward, accepting congratulations and exchanging greetings, I found myself reflecting on the journey, both professional and personal, that had led to this moment. "Quite a milestone," came Harold's voice, as he approached with 2 flutes of champagne, handing one to me. "Though, I suspect you've been too busy planning the next 5 years to fully appreciate it." I smiled, accepting the glass. Guilty as charged. The Quantum Computing Initiative launches next quarter, and the European expansion— "Rebecca," he interrupted gently. "Take a moment. Look around. What you've built here deserves acknowledgement before you race toward the next horizon." I followed his gaze, taking in the scene. Employees from different departments mingled with clients and industry partners. The atmosphere buzzed with genuine enthusiasm and camaraderie. This wasn't just a corporate celebration. It was a community, united by shared purpose and achievement. "You were right," I admitted. 5 years ago, when you told me the board wanted me as CEO, you said I was the right leader for Horizon Axion. I didn't fully believe it then." "But I did," Harold replied simply, "as did others who could see beyond the circumstances to your capabilities." He glanced toward Marcus, who was now introducing Emma to a group of cooing executives. "Some things work out exactly as they should, even when the path there is unexpected." Before I could respond, Olivia approached with Catherine Reynolds, the healthcare CEO who had become one of our most significant clients, and a personal mentor, after meeting me at the Women's Leadership Conference years earlier. "Rebecca, Catherine has news she wanted to share with you personally," Olivia said, her expression suggesting the information was significant. Catherine, now in her mid-60s but showing no signs of slowing down, smiled warmly. "I've just come from a meeting with the National Healthcare Alliance Board. They've voted to implement Horizon Axion's integrated cloud platform across all member systems, 28 hospital networks nationwide. The implications were enormous. We'd been pursuing this opportunity for nearly 3 years, gradually winning over individual hospital systems, but aiming for the enterprise-wide adoption that would establish our solution as the industry standard." "That's extraordinary news," I replied, professional composure masking my excitement. "When would implementation begin?" "January," Catherine confirmed. "The board was particularly impressed with your quantum security protocols. Nothing else on the market comes close." After discussing implementation timelines and next steps, Catherine excused herself to catch a flight. Olivia remained, her expression shifting from professional satisfaction to personal concern. "You should mingle a bit more, then go home," she said quietly. "You've been here since 5 this morning, and you have the Singapore video conference at midnight." "I'm fine," I assured her automatically. Olivia gave me a knowing look. "Rebecca, I've worked with you for 6 years. I know what fine looks like, and it doesn't include the 3 consecutive all-nighters you pulled last week for the Tokyo presentation." Before I could defend my work habits, Marcus approached with Emma, who had awakened and was now squirming to get down and explore. "There's Mama," he said, transferring our daughter to my arms. Emma immediately grabbed for my necklace, the silver key I still wore, now accompanied by a wedding band and a small diamond pendant Marcus had given me when Emma was born. "How's my big girl?" I asked, breathing in her sweet scent, feeling the familiar sensation of my heart expanding whenever I held her. Emma babbled a response, patting my face with chubby hands. "She's been charming the board members," Marcus reported. "I think she's secured funding for her college education already." Olivia excused herself to handle a media inquiry, leaving us in a rare moment of family privacy amid the corporate celebration. "The speech was perfect," Marcus said, "though I noticed you didn't mention your most impressive accomplishment." "Which is?" "Creating this," he gestured to the thriving company around us, "while also building this." He touched Emma's cheek gently. "Most people would consider either achievement remarkable on its own." I smiled, recognizing the compliment for what it was, acknowledgement of the delicate balance I maintained between professional ambition and personal fulfillment. A balance that had seemed impossible during those dark days after discovering Tom's betrayal, when work had been both refuge and validation. "It hasn't always been graceful," I acknowledged, "especially last quarter with the London expansion and Emma's ear infections happening simultaneously." "Graceful isn't the goal," Marcus reminded me. "Present is." It was a conversation we'd had many times throughout our relationship, finding ways to be fully engaged in whichever aspect of life required attention at that moment, rather than being perpetually distracted by competing demands. I hadn't mastered it, but I'd improved significantly from the workaholic who had once viewed personal time as an inefficiency. "I was thinking," Marcus continued, adjusting Emma's tiny cardigan, "after the Singapore call tonight, why don't we head to the lake house for the weekend? Emma loves watching the birds, and you could use the break before next week's board meeting." The lake house had become our sanctuary over the years, first as occasional weekend escapes, then as the place where Marcus had proposed, and later, as our retreat during my pregnancy when the demands of leading a global company while expecting our first child had sometimes felt overwhelming. "The lake house sounds perfect," I agreed, "though I'll need to review the quarterly projections." "On Saturday morning only," Marcus negotiated with the good-natured persistence that had helped me establish healthier boundaries. "For 2 hours maximum. The rest of the weekend is for family." I conceded with a smile, knowing he was right. 5 years of leading Horizon Axion had taught me that strategic disengagement often led to clearer thinking and better decisions. The company wouldn't suffer if I took 48 hours to recharge. "Deal," I agreed as Emma began squirming to be put down again. As the celebration continued around us, I excused myself to check on a few final details before departing. In my office, I found Jen waiting, a tablet in hand, and an expression that immediately put me on alert. "What's wrong?" I asked, setting Emma down to explore the child-proofed space she knew well from frequent visits. "Nothing's wrong exactly," Jen replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. "But there's something you should see before it hits the business press tomorrow." She handed me the tablet, open to a press release draft. The headline made my stomach clench. "Morgan returns, former Horizon CFO launches new venture capital firm." Tom. 5 years after his disgrace and departure from the business world, he was attempting a comeback. I skimmed the article quickly, noting the careful framing of his new enterprise, Phoenix Capital Partners, as a second act focused on funding innovation and supporting entrepreneurial vision. The press release made no mention of embezzlement, fraud charges, or the circumstances of his departure from Horizon. Instead, it referenced his extensive financial expertise and deep understanding of growth stage companies. "How did you get this?" I asked, handing the tablet back. "I still have contacts at the Journal," Jen explained. "They wanted to know if you had any comment before they run the story tomorrow." I considered my options. The impulse to set the record straight was strong, to ensure that Tom's attempted rehabilitation didn't erase the reality of his actions. But engaging publicly would only link us again in the press, potentially reviving a narrative I'd worked hard to move beyond. No comment, I decided firmly. Horizon Axion's success speaks for itself. Jen nodded, looking relieved. "That's what I told them you'd say. Professional and forward-looking." "Is he likely to succeed?" I asked, watching. Emma examined a colorful paperweight with intense concentration. "With the venture fund?" Jen shrugged. "He's been persona non grata in financial circles for years, but memories are short when money's involved. He's partnering with David Reynolds, who managed to avoid the worst of the fallout from their schemes." The mention of David Reynolds, Tom's co-conspirator who had received a lighter sentence by cooperating with authorities, triggered a flicker of the old anger. But it faded quickly, replaced by something closer to indifference. "It doesn't matter," I concluded, helping Emma up as she toddled toward me. "We've moved so far beyond that chapter that it's barely relevant." "That's my girl," Jen smiled approvingly. "Living well really is the best revenge." After Jen left, I stood at my office window with Emma in my arms, looking out at the Horizon Axion campus that had expanded dramatically under my leadership. What had once been a mid-sized tech company was now an industry leader, with a distinctive headquarters complex that included not just offices, but research facilities, conference spaces, and employee amenities that reflected our commitment to work-life integration. 5 years ago, Tom had planned to push me out of the company while simultaneously ending our marriage. His betrayal had been designed to leave me professionally diminished and personally devastated. Instead, it had propelled me into a leadership role I might not have pursued otherwise, forcing me to draw on strengths I hadn't fully recognized. "Ms. Morgan," my assistant's voice came through the intercom, interrupting my reflection. "The executive team is ready for the documentation review. Before you leave." "I'll be right there," I responded, gathering Emma and her small backpack of toys. The conference room adjacent to my office had become the venue for our weekly leadership syncs, sessions where we aligned on priorities, addressed emerging issues, and maintained the collaborative culture that distinguished Horizon Axion from competitors. Today's meeting would be brief, focusing on preparation for the midnight call with our Singapore team. "Sorry I'm late," I said, entering with Emma. My executive assistant needed some attention. Victor Chen, our CFO and Harold's nephew, immediately offered to entertain Emma while we worked. She went to him willingly. He was a favorite with his repertoire of silly faces and magic tricks. "The quarterly projections look strong," Victor reported as he balanced Emma on his knee. "Particularly with the Healthcare Alliance contract Catherine just confirmed. We'll need to accelerate hiring and implementation services to support the rollout." Olivia nodded. "Already in progress. I've authorized 20 additional headcount for Q1, primarily technical architects and project managers." The discussion continued efficiently, each leader providing updates while Emma moved from person to person around the table, receiving affectionate attention from the executives who had watched her grow from newborn to toddler. The scene embodied the cultural shift I'd championed at Horizon Axion, one where work and life weren't rigidly separated, but thoughtfully integrated. "One last item," James Fletcher said as the meeting concluded. "The PR team received an inquiry from Financial Innovations magazine. They're doing a cover feature on tech's most transformative leaders, and you're on their shortlist, Rebecca. Send them the standard background materials," I instructed. but any interview would need to focus on Horizon Axion's innovations and team achievements, not personal history. The others nodded, understanding my continued aversion to publicity that framed my success primarily through the lens of Tom's betrayal. After 5 years of consistent leadership and demonstrable results, I had largely succeeded in shifting the narrative, but some publications still gravitated toward the more sensational aspects of my story. As we wrapped up, Marcus appeared at the conference room door. "Car's ready whenever you are," he said, smiling as Emma spotted him and raced over, arms outstretched. "Go," Olivia urged. "We've got everything covered here. The Singapore team has the briefing materials, and I'll text you if anything critical comes up before the call." I gathered my things, thanked the team, and joined Marcus and Emma in the hallway. As we walked toward the executive elevator, employees offered warm greetings, many making a special effort to engage with Emma, who had become something of a mascot at headquarters during her visits. "Ms. Morgan," called a young woman from the marketing department, jogging to catch up with us. "I just wanted to thank you for approving my transfer to the London office. The international experience means everything for my career development." "You earned it, Zoe," I replied sincerely. "Your work on the healthcare vertical has been exceptional. London is lucky to get you." The brief exchange represented exactly the kind of leadership culture I'd worked to establish, one where employees knew their CEO considered their growth and development as individuals, not just as organizational assets. In the car, Emma quickly dozed off in her car seat, exhausted from the excitement of the day. Marcus reached across to take my hand, his thumb brushing over my wedding ring. "Penny for your thoughts," he said softly. "I just saw a draft press release," I told him. "Tom is starting a venture capital firm with David Reynolds. They're positioning it as a redemption story." Marcus's expression registered surprise, then concern. "How do you feel about that?" I considered the question carefully. 5 years ago, news of Tom attempting to rebuild his career would have triggered anger, perhaps even fear about how his reemergence might affect my hard-won reputation. Now, it generated only mild curiosity. "Honestly, I don't feel much of anything," I admitted. "It's like hearing about a distant acquaintance's new business venture. Mildly interesting, but not particularly relevant." Marcus smiled, squeezing my hand. "That's a testament to how far you've come. Freedom from emotional reaction to his choices is the final victory." He was right. In the years following our divorce, I had gradually disentangled my sense of identity from Tom's betrayal. The anger had faded, replaced by an understanding that his actions, while painful, had ultimately redirected my life in ways I couldn't have anticipated, and wouldn't change if given the option. "The Singapore team sent over their updated presentation," I said, changing the subject as I checked my phone. "They've incorporated the findings from the Australian pilot. Impressive results." "You can review it at the lake house," Marcus suggested, "after Emma's in bed tonight, before your call." "Perfect," I agreed, grateful as always for his understanding of the demands of my role while still gently insisting on protected family time. By the time we arrived home, a restored historical mansion in Denver's most prestigious neighborhood, chosen for its proximity to headquarters and spacious grounds where Emma could play, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. Our nanny, Maria, greeted us at the door, updating us on household matters before departing for the evening. The domestic rhythm we'd established felt both ordinary and extraordinary. Dinner with Emma, complete with more food on the floor than in her mouth. Bath time, with its splashing and giggles. Story time, with Marcus reading dramatically from Emma's favorite book while I sat nearby. One eye on my daughter's delighted face, the other on the presentation I needed to review before midnight. After Emma was asleep, Marcus and I retreated to the home office we shared. A large, comfortable space with dual workstations and a central seating area where we often reviewed projects together. his architectural designs alongside my business strategies. "I've been thinking," he said as I finished annotating the Singapore team's presentation. "With the Healthcare Alliance contract secured and the Quantum Initiative launching next quarter, it might be a good time to consider that board seat at the Children's Hospital Foundation." I looked up, surprised. The foundation had approached me months ago, but I'd hesitated, concerned about overextending myself with additional responsibilities. "You'd be exceptional at it," Marcus continued, "and it aligns perfectly with your interest in healthcare technology applications. Plus," he added with a knowing smile, "it might help with that work-life integration you're always talking about, contributing meaningfully outside of Horizon Axion." He understood me well, my drive to make an impact, my tendency toward workaholism, and my genuine desire to find sustainable balance. The board seat represented a potential bridge between my professional expertise and a cause that had personal meaning for us both, particularly after Emma's brief hospitalization for respiratory issues the previous winter. "I'll call them tomorrow," I decided. "See if the position is still available." Marcus's smile told me he'd known this would be my decision, as he often did. Our partnership had evolved into something neither of us could have predicted when we first met at that charity gala 5 years ago. A relationship founded on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine appreciation for each other's ambitions. At 11:45, I prepared for the Singapore video conference, adjusting the lighting in the office and reviewing my notes one final time. These midnight calls had become routine, a necessary accommodation to global business that I handled from home whenever possible to minimize time away from family. "I've packed Emma's overnight bag for the lake house," Marcus said, bringing me a cup of tea. "We can leave right after your morning meetings." I nodded gratefully, squeezing his hand. "Have I told you lately that you're remarkable?" "Not since breakfast," he teased, "but who's counting?" As he left me to my call, I reflected on the day's events. The company celebration marking 5 years of extraordinary growth, the Healthcare Alliance contract that represented a major strategic victory, the news of Tom's attempted comeback that had generated so little emotional response. 5 years ago, discovering Tom's betrayal on our anniversary had felt like the end of everything I'd built, personally and professionally. The pain had been searing, the humiliation profound. I couldn't have imagined then that those dark days would lead to this life, leading a company I had helped transform, married to a man who celebrated my success rather than resenting it, mother to a daughter who represented possibilities I'd once thought lost. The video conference system chimed, indicating the Singapore team was connecting. I straightened, professional mode engaging automatically as their faces appeared on screen. "Good evening from Denver," I began, my voice confident and warm. "Or rather, good morning to you all in Singapore. Let's discuss how we'll implement these exceptional results across the Asia-Pacific region." As the meeting progressed, discussing strategy and innovation with colleagues halfway around the world, I realized that all of this, was what real success looked like. Not just the professional achievements or financial rewards, though those were significant, but the ability to build a life that honored all aspects of who I was, without compromise or apology. Tom had once sought to define me through his betrayal, to write my ending according to his script. Instead, he had inadvertently freed me to write a far better story than either of us could have imagined. One where betrayal became opportunity, crisis became catalyst, and an ending became the most extraordinary beginning. The company I now led, the family I had created, the balanced life I continued to refine. These were not reactions to Tom's betrayal, but creations that had transcended it entirely. I was no longer Rebecca Morgan, the executive whose husband left her for his secretary. I was simply Rebecca Morgan, CEO, wife, mother, leader, defined by what I had built rather than what I had lost. And that, perhaps, was the most satisfying victory of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories. Right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.